Are you confused about V4V? Then let me clear a couple of things up. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Value for Value podcast. My name is Kyrin, your host. I am also the host of the Mere Mortals podcast, but this is the one where we look at digital content creators and how they can help connect deeper with their audience and also monetize at the same time. So I will just reiterate that I am live here on a Wednesday at 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time if you ever feel like joining me live for these things. And I just wanted to talk today about some common misconceptions that I've been seeing. So there's three things that really jump out at me, and I wanted to, address these and just reiterate why value for value is not these things, because it is easy to get confused because it is a rather confusing subject, but hence why we have this podcast here. So I'm going to go into the first one, which is V for V is all or nothing. And I've kind of seen this a lot of times where people would say, it's not V for V if you're doing advertising, or it's not V for V if you're not doing this portion of the show, and connecting the feedback loop and all of these things. I think that's helpful in a very, very, very small regard, but it's very easy to get trapped into, like elitism, or thinking, okay, this is the way it has to be done. And so there's no doubt it works best if your product or your show optimizes for it, much like it works best for advertising if your show is built around being a show for advertising. If you leave a break in the middle of the show where it's, this is where the ads would fit in, or you create it so that you have like a host read at the start or at the end because, this converts to more sales, this sort of thing. Well, I think value for value is much the same. So this is where you will do the things like acknowledging the people who have supported you. And, where do you do this in the show? Well, it doesn't particularly matter, or maybe it does matter, but you can experiment and try and find that up. And so I've come up with a little bit of a spectrum here, which I think goes from, I suppose, the way that you would monetize your show, I guess, for in the most kind of dispassionate, most disconnected way from your audience, all the way to probably the most connected, which I would say is value for value. So it would go something like this. You would have dynamically add insertions into your show. So there's just random things popping up midway through your show. You could have then the host read, and then it would maybe be something like an integrated sponsorship. Then it would maybe be something like it's your own business. So you're providing a product which you have created directly to your audience, so you know all about it. Then it might be something like the paywall and Patreon. This is where you're really tipping over into the listener supporter side of things. Then it'll be something like buy me a coffee, and then probably right at the end you would have value for value. And so you could kind of see there, well, it's sort of a spectrum, with value for value, the purest form of it, being all the way at the end. But you can have it anywhere and insert it any way along this point of things. So there's no reason that you can't have an ad supported show as well as being able to do value for value. And so I would actually just recommend checking out any of the Jupiter Broadcasting shows, because Chris Fisher has been doing this a fair bit. He has had advertisers for quite a long while with his different shows, but he has also very much embraced the value for value mentality, the mindset, and he gets it. And he's doing them at the same time. There's no reason that you can't do both. He probably does it the most smoothly out of any of the shows I've seen which has advertising. And there's many examples of others where they will have it enabled perhaps, but they don't really talk about it so much. And this would be some of the large Bitcoin podcasts, for example, because this is getting onto the second point of why V4V is not Bitcoin, that you can kind of see they have it enabled. You can send them messages, you can boost them in money directly to the show, but they never talk about it, they never acknowledge it. And so this is where, you can still say that it's value for value. Are they optimizing for it? Is it the perhaps best experience, like we've talked about with the feedback loops, like we've talked about connecting with your audience, like we've talked about why it is such a special feeling? No, obviously not. And obviously the gains that they will get for that is not as strong as it is when you acknowledge a boostergram and things like this. So yeah, I would just say, value for value, it's not all or nothing. You don't have to be 100% gung-ho about it. You don't have to be 100%. This is the only way that it's done. You have to do the feedback. Like, you have to read out my messages, that sort of thing. No, it's very much an optional point, but it is not. It's not like you have to completely radically alter your whole show. For example, if you found out about this concept and you want to try it out, but you're kind of like, oh, but I don't want to do a segment where I talk about the listeners, or I don't want to read out emails. I don't want to do all of these things. It's like, okay, that's fine. You can just experiment with it, have it in the background, and you can do other things at the same time. So that's probably the first misconception I wanted to talk about, which I mentioned Bitcoin, and this leads us onto the next one, which is value for value is not Bitcoin. Now, I can kind of get this one, why people might think this, because a lot of people were introduced to value for value via the payment mechanism, this being the Lightning Network and being able to give and receive Satoshis directly within the podcasting apps because of this whole ecosystem that has grown up from it. And if you want to know more about that, go back to any of the aspects of, I suppose, like this whole season, to be honest, like episode 42, the emergence of podcasting 2.0, or the micropayments in the episode after that, the boostergrams, there's episode 44. There's quite a few ones there if you want to jump back into those. I think it's good to go back to especially that micropayments episode, because you could hear me talk about in that episode how this is not just related to Bitcoin. The protocol allows any cryptocurrency to be used, and even fiat if you really wanted to. But it's more just, are people building on that? Do people actually want to use it this way? And so we can see, okay, the adoption is very much for Bitcoin, but there's no reason it can't be other things. And so this therefore doesn't mean that value for value is Bitcoin. Like it's only value for value if someone sends through a payment in Bitcoin. Wrong. We can see this with No Agenda. Once again, the people who, Adam Curry and John C. Dvorak, who created the value for value model, they were doing it through PayPal forever, for ages, and they were even using cash. For example, they would give an address where you could send in a cash donation if you wanted to. So, and people would do that. So we can definitely see, all right, it's not just Bitcoin. A lesser variation of this, I think, is also just focusing too much on the money aspect of it. Remember, value for value is time, talent, and treasure. So the time and talent are pretty big aspects of this, and it is very, very, I suppose, important to realize, like, the money side of things is great, but there's also all of these other aspects of people being able to help you. Of, if you wanted, say you wanted, your V4V, your all or nothing in, and your V4V all or nothing Bitcoin in, what's the best way to actually get more people sending stuff in? Well, it's probably for them to actually be sharing about the show as well to their friends. It's probably of creating a better product by them helping you out with a talent that they have that you don't have. And so this is where you can see, if you focus on the money aspect of it too much, you're going to leave, actually, funnily enough, a lot of money on the table, because your show won't be as popular, because it won't grow, because you won't have this, people helping you out voluntarily to creating a better product. And then I think also along this vein, all along this kind of V4V as Bitcoin sort of vein, is it's also not podcasting 2.0. So if you want to highlight one app or one method of people supporting you exclusively, I think that's probably the wrong way to go about it. Preferentially is probably, I think that's okay. If you're giving advice saying, for example, for this show, I usually just recommend any of the podcasting 2.0 apps, or I recommend going to meremodelspodcast.com/support, because there I have a full description of how you can do it in basically any of the various different ways. And I think that's okay, but I'm not going to ever just exclusively say like, here's one thing I hear, for example, all the time: Fountain. Go to Fountain, and send do value for value through there, as if that's the only one that you can do. And yeah, I think that's probably the wrong way to go about it, because things change over time, and this is where it's like, unless you're keeping on top of it constantly and consistently, it's probably going to change. And then, if you're still repeating, value for value is only done through Fountain, and then Fountain goes down, their servers break, the developers decide they want to move on to something different, or they do something with the app that you don't enjoy, or your show gets kicked off of there. For example, they could do that if they wanted to. That it's their application. They get to choose what is and isn't on there. Then you might be just have dug yourself a hole, which is hard for your audience to know, oh, there's other options to help support this show. So that was the second common misconception I really see kind of being touted around, that value for value is only done through Bitcoin. This is incorrect. And then the last one is that I guess that people won't give me money voluntarily. So this is kind of it's I guess the misconception is value for value doesn't work. That's probably the biggest one, to be honest. And you can kind of see this where it requires a lot of trust from your audience, and you have to involve yourself with them. So if there's no connection to your audience, to your listeners, you won't get your 1,000 true fans. You won't get that aspect of being able to support yourself in perhaps a more full-time manner from that, which is okay. Maybe you don't want that. Probably another misconception is that value for value is for everyone. I don't think that's true. I think a lot of people wouldn't find it on this 1,000 true fans topic. So this is a idea, I guess, created by Kevin Kelly quite a few years ago. And it was basically just saying, if you are a creator of some sort, and this is not related to podcasting, this was probably more actually aimed at artists or writers or things like this. He was saying, if you find 1,000 people who are willing to send you, $10 a month, that is $10,000 a month. That is, 120,000 over a year. That is more than enough to support your lifestyle, to support you being able to live in the world and create things. So really, you only need to find 1,000 people who are willing to give you $10 a month, or you could even, make it less than that if they're willing, $5 a month. That's still 60 grand a year. That's still enough to live on. And so this is where he was saying, the thing with this though is you have to be deeply connected with these fans. Because people won't just voluntarily give up $5 or $10 a month if they're not getting something out of it. And so how do you connect deeper with those fans? Well, you have to kind of be in there interacting with them. You have to go the extra distance to call them out, to acknowledge them, to thank them. So it's very much a value for value concept. And he was just saying, a lot of people don't want this. A lot of people just want to focus on their art, their creation of music or a podcast or a book or whatever it is. And they don't want to actually dive into the trenches of building a community, of interacting directly one-on-one. That's not their skill suit. They don't enjoy doing that. They would prefer that, to have that as a distance. A la Joe Rogan, for example, he very rarely interacts directly with his audience. And this is where you can go, okay, that's fine. Value for value is not for everyone. And this, I guess, is also that if you don't think it works, there is a kind of psychology behind this. And this is where you can go, I can expect it to work without asking, for example. People will just do it. Well, nothing functions like that. Why would this? If you don't ask for help from people, they're probably not going to do it. Almost certainly not going to do it unless you get to a ridiculous level and you can just put up a donation link on your Twitter or something like that, and then it will happen. But there was this guy, for example, it was a year ago. I can't remember his name. It's probably not worth repeating. And he was on Twitter and he was complaining about this. He was saying, value for value doesn't work. I tried it out for, 3 weeks or something like this, and your audience is ingrateful. They're not going to send you money voluntarily. You have to basically like force it out of them. You have to wring it out of them like they're a wet towel, and and really apply pressure. And you have to do this via paywalls. You have to do this by providing extra content behind a paywall, which only then are they willing to do it, and this sort of thing. And what you notice about that is probably he didn't try with the intent of really going at it. Doing it over 3 weeks, you're unlikely to start establishing it takes time to really get people in the habit of helping to support you, of acknowledging and understanding why this is important. And honestly, I just thought he was probably a little bit cynical about humanity. There's very zero-sum ideas of I've got to get my piece thinking or mentality, whereas value for value is very much more it's not a non-zero sum game. If you provide something, people will send you money and they will feel good about it, and it will expand the pie rather than you having to kind of steal it from other people. It's kind of a feeling like I need to get that money out of my audience to just grab it from them, and that requires a bit of force because there's only a certain amount of money in the world. And I think that sort of mentality, if that is the way that you think, you're not going to do well with value for value, and this is where value for value is probably not suited for you. My last little one here was a story I had of it depends on what type of fans and people that you attract as well, and that you want to attract. And so there was this, I've told you stories before about how when I was first podcasting, I was connecting with other podcasters. I was sending them messages via Instagram. I was leaving them nice reviews of their podcast on iTunes because, that's what people seem to want, even though it doesn't really do anything. And what was happening was that I would listen to the podcast, but even if I didn't particularly enjoy it, I would still leave a nice review. I would still find something nice to say about it. Is that ethical? I don't know. If I look at it more now and I'm like, it was kind of like a little bit, I probably should have just, if I didn't like that one, just pass on and move on. But whatever. That was just the way I do things. And I'm an optimistic person. I like to say nice things, or even if the whole thing is bad, I try and focus on the positive. I don't like being mean. Anyway, there was this podcast which was all about kind of Jeffrey Epstein, and this was back in 2020 or perhaps even 2019. And so Jeffrey Epstein was a big, it was not as big a scandal as it was when it first came out, but it was still just like, this guy's a pedophile, this guy's blah, blah, blah. And it was this podcast of these two women, and they were very bitter. They were very kind of cynical, snarky, sarcastic, seemed to have had a relatively popular show, just from the meager things that I could see about it. And I left a review, and I just let them know about that. I was like, hey girls, enjoyed this aspect of your podcast. Kudos, keep going at it. And the response I got back was, did you just call us girls? And I was like, yes. And then they just send me a link to something about saying how referring to women as girls is misogynistic, is the patriarchy or something. And I just went like, Jesus Christ, if this is how you interact with someone who's trying to be nice to you, what kind of reactions are you going to get if you want those people to help you out in the future? And the obvious answer is people like me would go, how ungrateful can you be? How rude can you be? And so this is definitely a show where it's like, okay, they should probably not be doing value for value because they obviously don't have the requisite, what would I call it, portion of humanity, the thinking that is required, the appreciation that is required of your audience to do something like that. And so, would value for value work with them? And the type of people that are probably attracted to that show, I would probably say no. And so that is where it's like, okay, is value for value everyone? Is value for value going to work for everyone? Probably not. It's probably best that they find some other way of supporting themselves. So yeah, those were probably the three misconceptions that I see the most popping up. Value for value is all or nothing. I think that's incorrect. Value for value is only Bitcoin. That is definitely incorrect. And value for value is going to work for everyone, or it won't work. Value for value doesn't work. Incorrect. It does work, but you do have to have the right mentality for it and the right, I suppose, portion of thinking of how you can do this. So, those are some misconceptions cleared up. Bam, bam, bam. Thank you, ma'am. And, I probably shouldn't say ma'am, should I? And so that is it for today's topic. Let's jump on to some boostergrams from last week. So, Mr. Adam Curry, please take it away.
Welcome to the Value for Value Boostergram Lounge.
Okay, so last week was a great week. I really enjoyed doing that episode, which I also recorded with the video, and it was a good reaction from that. One thing I do want to acknowledge and thank just before I get into the people who sent in some boostergrams was I'm not great at social media. I don't enjoy spending my time hanging out there. It's very much for me a kind of promotional activity. I put it out there, I blast it out, and if people comment and reply, that's awesome. I will try and get to that, but it's not a place I voluntarily go. And so, it's very, very much appreciated to everyone who shared the link to do that kind of work for me, because I'm not going to build up a 100,000, a million follower base or anything, because I just don't use them that way. I'm not going to create something that people find that interesting. It is going to be pretty much an informational alert system. Hey, I'm going live, or hey, I've done this thing. Check it out if you want to. So very much appreciated to everyone who kind of did that work for me, talking about time and talent of sharing the show and doing that. Super, super appreciated. I even got a comment from Void Zero on the YouTube video, which is super cool. So it's just interacting with these people I've heard about and never had the chance to interact with directly. So super, super cool. Let's get into some value for value and some boosts. And these were actually coming through live. I can't remember if I mentioned them at the time. So I think I did, but Booberry, he sent in two, which one was 1776. So I guess that's like a big Liberty boost. And he was saying, splits for life. Yes, 100%. And he said, is there a chat room with another 8888? And once again, no, not as of this exact moment. Something I got to work on. I've had a big week, and I've got some family stuff going on as well, which needs addressing. So yeah, that's taken up my time. I got another one here from Anonymous, and he's saying the chapter images really help with the explanations. 3,333 sats sent using Podverse. Thank you very much, Mr. Anonymous. If you want your name highlighted, and I put all of these on the meremodelspodcast.com/support website as well. We have a big list of everyone, and anonymous ones get chucked into the Mere Modelites, the kind of representation of all the unnamed people who help support us. So just a recommendation, if you do want a call out in particular, please let me know, and I will do that. But the chapter images, I that's why I do them. I think it was definitely for that type of episode, which is a how-to one, is worth checking out. And so if you are listening just via now, I would recommend getting a podcasting app where you can see the images, because I do put things in. The one for this episode is probably slightly less helpful, but one's coming up in the future. I'm going to do a one on statistics next episode, and so that's going to have all sorts of graphs, all sorts of things. That's definitely one where you want to have a podcasting app where you see chapter images. I could recommend Fountain, definitely, and Breeze, definitely. Podverse is pretty good, and I think Castomatic. I haven't actually check that out. But those ones are pretty solid. And then the final one here, the big baller boost for this week was Nick. So Nick Molster from Fountain. And he says, great tutorial, Kyrin. You're always so quick to start exploring the new developments within Podcasting 2.0, and your educational content is incredibly important for sharing it with others in a way that's easy to understand. For anyone listening, I highly recommend watching the video on YouTube too. And then he sent a big 20,000 sats with his own app of Fountain. So yeah, thank you very much, Nick. I do, this is one of those shows where I wouldn't say I do content which is non-evergreen that often. I would prefer to talk about things which you could come back to 5-10 years later, but this is one where it's like, this is worth, people need to know about why this is important. So I am willing to put in the kind of groundwork and keep on top of these things. So I do appreciate that. And the link for the YouTube video, I'll put it in the show notes as well, but it'll be in the chapter links. Once again, another good reason to get a Podcasting 2.0 app. So that were the boost for this week. Thank you very much, everyone. Once again, this is going to help support this show, help support the hosting costs of this, and is also being accumulated with the Mere Models podcast, brand, I guess. And so for everyone, if you reach 100,000 limit, we send you a Mere Model shirt. So I think Nick will be getting. I'm not sure how close he would be. He's probably about halfway there now, I think. So. Yep, just a recommendation as well. A little incentive there for you to boost in a little bit more. And once again, I really do appreciate that. And I really would just recommend that. I was proud of that episode about the value for value music. So and the kind of how to and how to access it for both musicians and for listeners. So would definitely just recommend sharing that on with someone if you think this would be useful for them. So that is the Boostergram Lounge for this week. Thank you very much. My tips section, this one's not a too solid one. It's kind of just like, this is all subjective. It's just like, there's no hard and fast rules with value for value. There's no code of, written in the tablet of Solomon or the tablet of Adam Curry and JCD. There's nothing like that. There's a lot of information, and I'll get onto one of those in a second. But this show as well, it's one of those moving things, which is not that it's so easy to grasp in a simple manner. I provide value and then you provide it back. What can be simpler than that? But the nuances, the details, the misconceptions, all of that sort of thing. If you've got something wrong, if you've hear someone else saying something wrong, it's okay. It's just this is a natural order of things, and you just got to get used to it and just try and educate as best as you can. And in talking about education, so for my app or service highlight this week, I would recommend checking out valueforvalue.info. So there's a website, I believe, created by Adam Curry, and it's got a lot of interesting information here on the value for value philosophy. And I would just say this is a great website for those who prefer text, because it's all pretty much text based. It's got pieces written by different people. It's got the rough numbers, got the philosophy. It's got some guides from Podverse, Fountain, and Podcast Index. It's got how you can contribute to learning more about value for value, about Podcasting 2.0, that sort of thing. So I would just recommend checking out that if you are, or if you know someone who is more of a learner via the text method of reading rather than listening, which I'm not great at writing things out, which is why I do podcasting. And so this is just a great thing for those who perhaps would not get much benefit from my show, from an audio one, but they would get something text-based. Go to valueforvalue.info with the number 4 being in there. And would just recommend that. And then finally, value for value, my last segment here, where I give 15% to someone who I think is worthy of a call out. And it's going to be maybe an unexpected one this week. And I'm going to send 15% to comic strip blogger, CSB. And this guy, so For those who don't know who Comic Strip Blogger is, he has been following No Agenda, Adam Curry's stuff for a long, long time. And this guy is just so consistent with his support every week. And it's not just the consistency, it's the highlighting of it, of making sure it actually goes through, on the Podcasting 2.0 show, he's the delimiter because he comes in every single week, with the same amount or even increases the amount over time with a long, detailed, thought out message. And just from my, random interactions with him, I don't know him. I have barely interacted with him. But what I would just say is, he always seems to be out and about trying to help educate other people and promoting value for value. Several of my points today were either surfaced or influenced by him. The one about, which one was it? The Bitcoin one. He brought this up on the Mastodon chat not too long ago, which helped give me the idea for this episode. So I do just want to acknowledge people who are doing great things for value and helping to educate and promote. And I think he's definitely worthy of a call out and some recognition. So 15% of today's episode goes to Comic Strip Blogger, and I thank him very much for his work and everything that he's doing. And I'm going to leave it there for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining the Value for Value show. You might have heard, I'm a little bit sick this week. I was at a wedding all last from Thursday till Monday. So it has been a very, very big, long, stressful week for me. So this was a bit of a shorter episode and one which was just kind of an ease in back after a pretty hectic time for me. So I do want to just thank everyone. Value for Value. What is the best thing that you could do for me? You know what it would be for this week is just, help educate and let another podcaster know about Value for Value. So you can do this by, sending them a message directly, asking them if there is a way to help support them directly. If they do have a Patreon and PayPal, you could maybe say, I don't like using that way. Is there a way of doing it, through a direct contribution to a PayPal account? Or, just maybe if you think it's worthwhile, and if you think the ideas would be amenable to them, moving them on that scale that I provided further away from perhaps the advertising and more to the full value for value end, or some small highlights or something like that. But yeah, I definitely think that value for value does work for a lot of people, will work for a lot of podcasters and other digital content creators. And I just the more people that know about it, who get to experience it, I think the better it is for everyone, because it is definitely, I think, the more ethical way of creating a show, at least personally. So I'm going to leave it there for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. As I mentioned, next week's episode is all going to be about statistics and some stats. This will be from podcasting hosting companies. This will be about how much value is actually flowing through the value for value method using Bitcoin with the way that we can actually see it. So definitely one to keep an eye out on for next week. So until then, ciao for now. Kyrin out.